Goedenavond, bonsoir à tous, good evening everybody. My name is Petrus Kemme, and on behalf of the Flanders Architecture Institute, I would like to welcome you to this night's lecture in the Across series. The Across series is a collaboration between A+ Architecture in Belgium, the Faculty of Architecture at the University of Liège, and the Flanders Architecture Institute. And in this series, we aim to cross some borders in architectural discourse. First and foremost, there is the linguistic border. So, therefore, we invite young architects to present their work on the opposite side of the linguistic border. French-speaking offices give a lecture in the Single in Antwerp, usually, and Flemish offices give a lecture at the University of Liège. But we also want to cross a generational border. And therefore, each time the office is introduced by a senior architect from the region in which the lecture is held. Of course, the current circumstances unfortunately prevent us from hosting the series in the usual setting in the Single with an audience, but we took the opportunity this year to present the work in a different way, from the office of the architects themselves. So tonight we are coming to you from Wanversier-Bolet, outside of Charleroi, where the office of tonight's speakers is situated. Goffart Polomé Architectes was founded in 2012 by Damien Goffart and Brice Polomé. Together with Marie Marx, who became a partner in 2019, they lead a team of about 10 people. And the portfolio they have built up shows an impressive variety, not only in scale and program, but also in the appearance of the project. Each design is unique in its expression without ever being overly expressive. Their shared DNA is an approach that is, quote, at once rational and holistic, considering the specific context, the time and the space as the fundamental building materials. From there, they make architecture that is precise and clear, but also layered and full of character. And that resulted in them winning the Grand Prix d'Architecture de Wallonie in 2019. Goffart Polomé Architectes will be introduced a bit more in depth by Niklaas Deboutte. He is a founding partner of Meta Architectuurbureau, who are based in Antwerp, and is an office that has left already a lasting impression on architecture in Flanders. And they share a bit of a clarity in their architecture with tonight's speakers. Before giving the floor to Niklaas, however, I would like to thank a few people. The Flemish government, La Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles, Brussels Capital Region, and D'Ieteren Imo for their support of this lecture series. Also, I would like to point out that during the lecture you can leave questions in the comments on our Facebook pages for the architects, and at the end of the lecture we'll try to get them to answer them. And with that, I would like to give the floor to Niklaas of Meta for the proper introduction.
Good evening, I'm Niklaas Deboutte from Meta Architectuurbureau, and this evening I'm introducing Goffart Polomé Architectes de Charleroi, and I would like to see it in a context of collaboration. Let me tell a little story about collaborations in general, and then I will specify how we met Brice and Damien. A few years ago, Christian Barret, the Brussels Stadsbouwmeester, whispered in our ears that we should work together for jobs in Brussels with a balloon office. Otherwise, there will be opposition from the French-speaking part in Brussels. And he did a similar thing with Reservoir A. He said, if you would like to work in Brussels and do competitions and win, of course, then you should work together with a Flemish office, so there's no obstruction for the Flemish-speaking part in Brussels. So he whispered that maybe that would be a nice marriage between the both of the offices. And we contacted each other, both with the agenda to enter a competition. So that's the first step where we entered for a competition in Brussels for the B post. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but later we had a good understanding. It was good chemistry between the two offices. And then later, Reservoir A proposed to do a competition together in Charleroi, but this time with their office, which is called RGPA, which is in fact two offices together. It's Reservoir A together with Goffart Polomé. And again, we had a lot of fun. And maybe this is the most essential thing about collaboration. It's having fun. Because when there's good chemistry, there's a good project. And we worked hard, and finally we won the competition. It was for an office building for a social housing company in the center of Charleroi. So that's how we met Damien and Brice for that competition. So since then we have we would like to enter again for competitions, and we're looking for opportunities. So that's a kind of a continuous relationship. But of course, if you want to work together, and it's not always easy, we have also bad stories about working together with other offices. But there should be in the DNA of the offices a similar thing. It's like every relationship. It makes it interesting when there's enough overlap, as we say, it should be like that, and enough differences. Because the differences add the extra spices to your attitude, towards your reflex to design. And the similarities are necessary to understand each other. So with Goffart Polomé, we have that. There is enough similarities between both of the offices, so we understand each other very well. So there's no competition, there are no fights. It's only it's learning from each other. Now I would like to say something about the architectural identity of Goffart Polomé. First of all, I would like to say, like they say in France, it's une architecture honnête. And what does it mean? It means that they can make very simple solutions for quite complex questions. And that's definitely a smart way to deal with architecture. And the way they do it, it's most of the time it's in the way mathematically the geometrical solutions and compositions are done. And then the way the structure and materiality is introduced, it's all quite logic and evident. And at the end, it's a very rational design, but there's also at the same time a lot of poetry in it. And it's very important to say also it's what we say a very affordable architecture. It's not high-end, it's not a fancy design which costs a lot. No, it's very low profile and it's part of real life. So that's why we definitely appreciate Goffart Polomé, and that's definitely one of the main reasons why we like to work together with them, because it's a DNA we really appreciate. So thank you for listening. Niklaas.
We would like to thank A+, Liège and VAI for inviting us to describe our practice. It means a lot for us to conclude this cycle of lectures. And of course, very special thanks to our friend Niklaas. It's a shame that we cannot lecture at the single tonight. It would have been a good reason to share a drink after this lecture. This lecture is an opportunity to have a look back over the last 10 years. And during this introspective work, a word appeared several times: congruence. Congruence means to us a specific currency between the discourse and the practice, to have no facade. And this value is important because it transcends all aspects of our practice, from how we approach architecture and choose our clients, to how we organize our work and communicate in the office. In this case, congruence is perceived in three different features: studio, context, and clients. Working at the studio. At the beginning, we called the office Goffart Polomé because it was so easy, but honestly, also because finally we had the chance or the opportunity to have our own office, and perhaps maybe a bit about ego. However, it doesn't represent our actual practice. Our purpose is not to work with the front and the back line. We work more as a team with an iterative approach. Actually, we are about 10 people, including architects, engineers, interior designer, and so on. For example, this lecture, like projects in general, was prepared as a collective work in which everyone had the opportunity to add their own inputs. That's why tonight I'm so glad to introduce you, Pierre-Loup, the youngest member of the office.
Hello, as Brice told you, I'm not only here to support him discussing our approach in English, yeah.
The second item is working with in a specific context. You know, during my studies in Saint-Luc, Brussels, one of my professors once told me that if I wanted to practice architecture, I should just focus only on competitions, only on public standards. At this studio, we don't agree with this view. In fact, 90% of the built environment service traditional typologies like houses, collective housing, commercial areas, retails, and so on. So we think that it's our duty to get our hands dirty. In French, I would say, mettre les mains dans le cambouis. At our scale, we consider that this approach could contribute to active debate on the role of architecture in society. In this way, we think that it's very important that some organizations such as ICA, UA, or Burmesters in Wallonia are contributing to enrich the dialogue in architecture. So the third one is working with clients. What does it mean for us? One basic example to involve our interlocutor, for example, promoter. We developed a graphical communication based on renders, photorealistic ones, you know, easy to understand for everyone. Even though we like collages and models, we have to do their own tools, and sometimes pervert them. So believe us, we have to put in as much energy to convince them as we need to win a competition. In fact, our goal is more to tell about a really nice or beautiful story, even more so when we have to deal with people who have no particular architectural expertise or sensibility. Through the years, the office has developed an ability to narrate. In this way, we usually refer to mental images to illustrate the project. This has led to the emergence of its own language, defined by idioms. For the sake of this lecture, we decide not to focus on every specific aspect of each project that we will show you. Obviously, circularity, reuse, sustainability, rhythm, structural grid, or structural details, and so on, or transcend our entire portfolio. Instead, in this case, we just wanted to talk about their morphological process, especially how much it has been adapted to a Wallon commissioner, for instance. Tonight, we prefer using anecdotes. So we structure our naive and spontaneous approach into 4 different idioms to explain a project: geometric, ornamental, vernacular, and incremental.
So to begin, we would like to discuss the geometrical playground we often refer to when we approach a project. The use of basic geometric shapes such as the circle, the triangle, the square, the hexagon, and so on is particularly meaningful as it is appropriable by everyone, because everybody knows what a square or a circle looks like. So it refers to the notion of archetype defined by Aldo Rossi as the expression of a set of common values. So basic shapes refer to mental images, memories in our minds, which is crucial to tell a beautiful story. The use of grids, sequences, and basic forms adds rigor and flexibility to a place, following a simple structural logic, for instance. However, what brings life to such a concept is often the exception to these strict geometrical rules, and, for example, an unexpected curve, a softened or sharpened angle, or just a simple offset.
So when we launched the office in 2012, we applied to 2 competitions. We won both, beginner's luck. And one of them was the extension of a school in Bossière, a small village near Jean-Blou. The program was just to add 2 classrooms and toilet facilities to the existing school complex, so not too difficult. As you can see, the shape of this extension is a basic circle. And to be honest, we didn't come up with this winning idea. The person who did was the officer in charge of the public procurement. Hello, Hubert. But you have to imagine that a very serious guy, a technocrat who doesn't believe in fairy tales. At that time, this guy could not imagine how his draft was so adapted to the context, and we couldn't imagine how he would contribute to our practice with this radical form. Obviously, the shapes offer many benefits. It offers the most compact form possible, you know, the circle. It leaves more space to the external courtyard where children can play and run around the building. And another aspect of the project that we had to fight for is the detail of the windows. The matrix span of the windows permits to avoid any beams to support the bricks, so it's more cost efficient. And finally, inside, the curve also participates to the pedagogic scheme. It focuses the attention of the children on the board and of course on the teacher.
Another project with a geometric approach is the left side business park in Charleroi. The project has the ambition to become a new landmark in the city, the literal translation of the metropole with a big M, creating an urban theme. Actually, we were commissioned by a developer together with RGPA, which is, as Niklaas said, a partnership with Réservoir A, to design office spaces, public facilities, and residential complexes. It is quite funny because at the beginning, the developer arrived with just a rectangular floor plan telling us, okay, so this is the most financially efficient plan, so just don't make it too complicated. But actually, we decided to find a more sensitive volumetry, better responding to the context of Charleroi. So we tried two different typologies. The first one, which is a pentagonal tower, could suggest a basic and also caricatural reference to Charleroi master plan designed by Vauban. However, you can see that in this case, it is an hexagon in the case of Charleroi. We actually tried to draw an hexagonal tower, but it didn't fit on the plots, so we decided to use a pentagon referring to other works of Vauban. Beyond this caricatural anecdote, which wasn't the first reason to conceive this project, the pentagonal plan offers a great capacity which balances the important slenderness or bigness of the emergence. Also, the 5 facades instead of 4 in a rectangular plan allow more offices to take advantage of natural light. The second typology is actually a triangle for the residential program. It is inspired by the Carolo shape of urban plots. So the benefits of such typology are the fact that every apartment gets a view over the marina. Taking a look at this postcard, at the postcard of Charleroi, nobody could actually imagine that we are in Charleroi. So it's actually a good example of render manipulation.
This project is at the junction of two territories, the village and the countryside. The program consists of 2 blocks of 14 apartments. And once again, we use the geometric method to articulate this transition and offer porosity between these two territories. The first intention was to keep the view over the medieval tower in the background, as you can see on the right picture. This means that we divided in 2 blocks the initial oblong bar, despite the intention of the Tont's urban planner, once again, another street guy, hello Nick. The 2 pavilions are reinforced by a strong geometric shape, the hexagon. As you can see on the floor plan, the hexagon gave the possibility to offer at least 2 different views to each apartment. A corner view, more efficient for filling the course of the day. But also, we were quite aware of the consequences of using such a complex shape on building the site. So we decided to soften the angles by changing them from 120 degrees to 90 and 150 degrees. It's allowed us to retrieve a certain orthogonality in the floor plan to ease the construction by using prefab slabs. It also provides a better habitability, and it's clearly easier to put furniture in a rectangular room, you know. The opening of the building is only visible in the living room, which gives a specific dynamism to the space. And finally, to conclude this project, the geometric work in the central core creates an impressive space flooded with natural light.
As you surely know, the question of ornament in architecture is a concept that many theorists and architects already defined in the past. So instead of giving another definition, we would like to recommend Pio Fabi that made a very inspiring lecture about it. In our case, we share the vision of Antoine Picon saying in French, si l'ornement a lieu d'être, il doit apparaître évident. So it means that the ornament, as approached by the office, has to appear as an evidence. The ornament is entirely merged with the structure to the extent that they are indissociable and not being just a suit for the building, using Antoine Picon's words. At the beginning of our practice, we abused of the chantier by using Rothcast and just an external coating in a lot of our projects. And actually today, we got through this epoch.
The project for the future Fine Arts Museum in Charleroi also follows an ornamental approach. The project is located in a heritage building called the Duffel Stables. The program is divided into two, the Agora and the temporary exhibition on the ground floor, while the permanent exhibition is on the first one. Two features define the context of the project. The existing entrance of the heritage building, which didn't face the street, and the imposing presence of the police station designed by Jean Nouvel and MDW, which shines as a lighthouse over the city. We decided to draw a new entrance to give the building a strong image and establish a new relation with the public space on the street. A few years after winning the competition, this choice was confirmed by the deputy mayor when he told us that for once we will not enter a public space in Charleroi by its rear, which is the case, for instance, with the town hall. This entrance is directly visible from the street, instead of sharing it with the esplanade of the police tower. This door is actually our only intervention on the facade. This important and exuberant entrance gave the opportunity to create a new monumental staircase inside. This intervention allowed us to reorganize the floors inside, previously independent from one another, to make them dialogue with this new grand staircase. This approach provides real connection between the old stables on the ground floor and the first floors. The layers which were previously stacked up now overlap.
The project for the new headquarters of the Société Wallonne de Crédit Social in Charleroi is a good example of this type of approach. It's a winning project for a public bank that we conceived together with Meta and RGPA. The building is composed of 6 floors dedicated to the bank and 1 for social housing. The new building is approached as in an ornamental way, using the same bricks color to respond to the postmodern context around it, a style that is actually shared by a lot of public buildings in Wallonia. The ornamental dimension of the project is also combined with its great functionality. Maybe the architectonic shape of the building seems evident today, but we have to say that the association, the real partnership with Meta, clearly helped us to approach this sensitive conception. To fit with the surrounding, a peristyle was imagined along the facade, playing with the porosity, the transparency, and also integrating public equipment into it. Somehow, this aspect defines the social purpose of the SWCS, which is a social bank, in opposition to traditional financial institutions that are much more close. Finally, the facade doesn't take account of the variation of the program. it offers the same ornamental consideration for the bank and also for the social housing.
This project of collective apartments takes place in Malone, in Namur. The requirements of the project imposed us to complete the initial private housing program with social housing. First of all, it's clear that the project and its plan seems quite basic. However, it's the diversity of the program that we found interesting, despite the first purpose of the promoter, means profitability. You know, hybridization makes a society more organic. So to give a bit more flavor to the floor plan, we proposed a small coquetry on the facade by using a frieze. The slab nosing unifies the silent elements of the building, such as balconies, lintels, and so on. Actually, it was important to us that both buildings, no matter their programs, receive the same coquettish touch. It aims to bridge the gap between the social disparities of its inhabitants. Talking about these elements, the developer didn't consider their existence before starting the construction, as usual. At the beginning of the project, he just wanted the building permit to be granted. So when he figured out about these ornamental elements, he just wanted to put rust-cast external coating instead. It shows in this case that collaborating with developers often requires continuous negotiations, give and take, to find the balance between architectural value and financial profitability.
So this third approach defines the sensibility with which the office works in Wallonia, especially in highly traditional and conservative areas. Though the vernacular architecture might be perceived as contradictory, because actually vernacular is by definition an architecture without an architect, focusing more on the specific geographical and social needs of a local group of people. We use a more like neo-vernacular architecture that is supporting a more contemporary interpolation within a vernacular context. It defines an architecture that both get inspired by local traditions and uses actual technologies and aesthetic language to develop a more resilient response to a particular program in a particular context. This approach uses well-known archetypes which people can relate to and easily understand.
The kindergarten is located in Loverval, close to Charleroi. It's implanted in particularly wooded and hilly area. And actually, the context of the kindergarten, both built and unbuilt, influenced many choices that we made during the design. For instance, we used a double pitch roof by metaphor of the surrounding context, but also it was, in this case, the most efficient concept to deal with the important vegetation around the building. The use of flat roof or adding girders would have demanded an important maintenance. In this case, the engineer accuracy is crucial to prevent the roof from flying off. As you can see in the section, we also drew large skylights to the roof to signify the presence of the hills into the living spaces. Thanks to the lower and upper windows, the children can at the same time perceive the roots of the trees on the ground with worms and their branches in the sky with birds. There were also an important frugality imposed by the design and build approach chosen by the commissioner. And once again, there was no architect among them. So for the project, we have to prove that everything could work within a strict budget. And you know, it led to a simple but efficient proposal, a simplicity that appeared in the choice of materials. We only used wood and bricks that were very common in the surroundings building. And even though their arrangement seems logic today, we spend a lot of time on the layout to grant the durability and the flexibility to the building. In the end, I have to say that this project clearly marked the beginning of a new chapter for this studio.
So the project for the gastronomic restaurant Le Chez Gourmand, which has won 1 star at Le Guide Michelin, clearly expresses this intention. The restaurant is located near Gembloux, so it's a rural and agricultural region. And at the beginning of the design, we had to deal with very restrictive and conservative urban regulations. The rules are actually defined by romantic memories of traditional architecture. To give you an idea, here are some of the rules we had to respect. One rule set the angle of the sloping roof and the symmetry of the ridge, and another one just described the opening of the facade and its proportions. But the thing is, the build context around the project was not particularly expressing this vernacular architecture, even though it was so important for the municipality to respect it. However, we decided to respect these rules and we played a bit with them as well. But for instance, we rotated the roof by 45 degrees to increase the dynamic of the volumes. And the timber framework induced by this manipulation also contributes to the acoustic inside the space. Also, the facades were made following the ratio required by the urbanistic rules, which led to the, let's say, temple aspect of the project. And somehow, the neo-vernacular approach is clearly identified in display with the rules. It reinterprets, in this case, the romantic vision of local architecture.
Another project involving vernacular or neo-vernacular characteristic is our recently built salt warehouse in Oufalise, in the southeast of the country. This region is marked by an important presence of agricultural and commercial typologies, like farms, hangars, commercial zoning, and so on. So our approach was actually to reinterpret the code of those typologies to give a singularity to the project. And of course, building a warehouse is mainly about the structure, and its imposing dimensions are somehow softened by the use of polycarbonate. Polycarbonate, in this case, has a very interesting feature, such as translucent and reflexive capacities. It also integrates the structure into its environment. So we also decided to create a wooden structure as a reference to the silviculture typical of the region. Thanks to its great size, the project plays the role of a landmark on the Oufalise landscape. Furthermore, storing salt is not so easy, you know. This implies taking into account its important corrosive power. This is why wood was chosen, considering its efficient natural answer to such a context. In the end, designing a warehouse implied an important frugality in a designer-build approach as well. It's just a roof and a structure supporting it. However, it's this particular simplicity that gives the entire sensibility to the project. But for this time, you have to know that something went wrong with this project. Since the users moved into the building in the last fall, they didn't understand this simplicity. At this moment, they are sealing the construction on every side with profile steel sheets or sheet. But we are still figuring out how to fix it. And once again, this requires a lot of energy for us.
So our incremental idiom aims to mimic the fractal generation often found in nature. Combined with utopia, it acts as a narrative tool to invite people into the imaginary of a project. In Belgium, the territory is somehow hover-built, so you can really start from a blank slate. When there is nothing noteworthy about the existing situation, we have to bring about a new reality. We do this by adding elements on or complementing the situation, but without denying it. So to do this effectively, we need to identify the underlying organism which defines it. We uncover powerful mental images that will guide us in our conception and empowerment the site. This added resilience will allow the site to live on and to thrive.
In 2016, we participated in a competition to redefine the existing football stadium in the center of Charleroi. The tender brief requested a new scheme to provide a cordon atmosphere. So a real basic request that we try to transcend in this time. So that's why at the beginning of our reflection, we decided to start by analyzing the existing structure to understand its logic and its history. We rediscovered the grid and all its evolution like a palimpsest, and we decided to put it in the spotlight. So instead of just adding a new layer onto the facade, as several competitors did, we searched for a new currency based on the concept of the Cordoba Mosque. The mosque follows a grid which shows its historical evolution in a defined perimeter. So the concept was introduced using a strong mental image to express its visual identity, the shell which can open during the matches to connect the collective area of the stadium to the public area of the street. But this comparison also expressed the volumetric response of the project to the duality of the site. The smooth facade connecting the low residential typologies, a street with attached houses, and then the facade deployment over the esplanade to act as important public landmark.
So this project is located in Tamines, in the municipality of Sambreville, between Charleroi and Namur. And it's actually the last competition we worked on, and we are still waiting for the results. So the program was to reconnect 3 public buildings in order to extend the capacity of the existing cultural center. Also, it was an opportunity to improve their energetic performances. So the major parameter we had to deal with was the strong visual identities of each building. One of them, the former town hall of Tamines, received an important decorative attention on its front facade. Meanwhile, its back facade was completely neglected. The site is also characterized by an important heterogeneity due to the successive addition of annexes. None of them is particularly famous for their beauty, as you see. So during the initial site visits, there was a particularity of the windows on the ground floor that actually marked our attention, a pattern that we integrated actually in the final design. So our proposal was to reconnect these different styles both visually and physically without imposing another identity between them. Instead, the connection reduces the strong contrasts between buildings using an abstract organism, and actually it almost parasitizes the mutilated facades to retrieve a certain homogeneity while improving the energetic performances of the project. Finally, the glass bricks increases the evanescence of the junction via its translucent and refractive capacities.
So this last project is actually composed of 2. Both projects were for clients very dear to me, my mother and my 2 brothers. The particular nature of these clients gave us the opportunity to experiment new typologies. It was like a life-size lab, and the guinea pigs or the cobayes were my families. So at the beginning, there was an existing house implanted in the middle of even bigger plot in Somzé, near Walcourt. The purpose was to add a new pavilion for my mother and new house for one of my brothers. So what do you find beside a country house? Well, sometimes you can maybe find, for example, a garden shed or sometimes an high voltage cabin. In this case, we decided to apply it literally. A full wooden pavilion for one and a concrete structure with green chantilly, rose cast, for the other one. Obviously, it's a bit caricatural. However, it gives you an important mental image of what the concept, the story of the project is. The real challenge in this project was to define a new conception of living together while preserving everyone's intimacy and confer a single identity, even though it's the same regular square plan for both projects. For instance, the facades are 11 meters long. Furthermore, to preserve their intimacy, we also implanted the pavilions in a 45 degrees rotation from the existing house. And finally, a lot of thinking went into exploring the possibilities of both materials, concrete and wood, to propose the most coherent response without compromising on anything. This last project brings our presentation to a close. We hope that this glimpse in our work has raised your interest and gives you a better understanding of our practice. If you have any questions whatsoever, we will be more than happy to answer them. And don't worry if your questions are too complicated for me to understand. Pierre-Loup and Peter are good lifeguards. Thank you very much.
Thank you both very much for your lecture. Very interesting. Also, the approach of the anecdotal stories behind them. I would also like to invite once more the people watching at home, if they have any questions, to leave them in the comments. But first, maybe I will ask a question. There's a clear love of geometry and as a kind of a way to approach your project. And at the same time, in your lecture, you mention references which are actually almost a bit more distant from the project themselves. They are a bit more abstract, perhaps, or they come from nature, like the shell. But at the same time, while we are sitting here in one of in the meeting room of your office, I see a rich collection of magazines and architectural publications. Do you use also references on an architectural level, like projects of other architects, historically, contemporary, especially having in mind that you, as you explained, that you work as a team, and I imagine that means a lot of like communication and coming to an understanding. Do you use references as in the sense of coming up with a similar vocabulary when you design the projects?
Yes, it's exactly this way. But reference from everywhere, from I don't know, a monastery till I don't know other things. But we use this way because for us it's the most efficient tool to communicate each other in the office. So yeah, it's the best. First, the best approach to understand each other. Yeah, I will say that.
As I mentioned also in the introduction, and as the people have seen in the presentation, each project has its own particularity. It's very distinct identity and way in which it adapts to the context. At the same time, the context in which you build sometimes is also overflown with elements that might not be architecturally that interesting. Do you find there's always something in the environment that you can use spatially, or is it sometimes also a bit of a tricky process to find these references in the context? I'm asking it because it's especially with the last project and the garden sheds, for instance, and the electricity cabin. Yeah. It seems almost and please understand this as a compliment. It almost seems effortless the way in which you introduce these elements from the context into your projects.
Okay, but you know, in Wallonia you have to to be understandable, accessible for your clients. And in this case, it was just a joke with the high voltage cabin and garden shed. But sometimes it's also reference for us to develop a kind of project. But how can I say? Maybe you can help me this time.
Or say it in French if it's
but if I can just give an example, I think the project of the cultural center in Tamin is a good example of this question we ask ourselves, is what to keep and what to delete, let's say, somehow. And actually it's a question that was not especially mentioned in the form we received at the beginning. And we have to make choices, and also with this, we just decided to keep several elements, but in the same time there is some kind of, let's say, a major discourse that is transcending the project, which is to find a certain coherency into it, so to retrieve a certain coherency, because you have a series of annexes of added elements, which actually some kind it's blurring the site, and the idea is just to very honestly and very simply find an, let's say, a new coherency, a new homogeneity into it, without imposing our idea to the context, let's say.
Maybe one final question from my side while I check quickly if there are any questions from Facebook. I think it's interesting the range in which you work, from very rural to major urban projects, and it's kind of I would say maybe I'm too self-conscious, but it's atypical for institutions like ours to be hosted here in the hills outside of Charleroi. How, I don't know, to what degree does your being located in part here in the countryside, how does it inform your work as an architect? Is it important for you to be located here while working on, for instance, rural projects?
Okay, it's first of all, it's our identity for sure. I think that we won't be here together if we were not from Charleroi or from One Bollet, for sure, because it's a real territory to experiment architecture, and I think that it's a pleasure for us to experiment something and to conceive something that people couldn't imagine in this kind of place, like in rural area, as you see with for example, the Chez Gourmand, the restaurant. So it's this constraints, rural constraints, you can stick up all the conditions that you will involve the project, and for us it's more, it gives more flavor really to overlap as Niklaas said, the conditions, and it means that it's more interesting for us and more intense.
Okay, I think there was a question from Facebook or not? No? Okay. Then I would like to thank you once again for a very interesting lecture. I'm sure if people have questions, they will find you somehow, some way. It's not that hard these days. And to close off, I want to thank once more the Flemish government, La Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles, Brussels Capital Region, and Dieteren IMO for their support of this series. And with that, I wish you a very pleasant evening and hope to see you soon again.